if I have a class A and I am trying to inherit, I'm trying to create a class B publicly from class A. In that case, I will have to create an object of the derived class, that is class B, upon which the corresponding constructor will get invoked. So let us say here default constructor is getting invoked, but before the constructor of the derived class is executed, the compiler will implicitly make a call to the default constructor of my base class. Even though it is not there, it will be created, and the default constructor will perform the initialization of data members of the class A. So we can say that uh, in the given hierarchy of any inheritance, may it be a single inheritance, may it be a multi-level inheritance, may it be a multiple inheritance, any sort of inheritance example, the order of construction call is from derived to base. Okay, I'm saying that order of calling is this, but the order of execution is from base to derived. Understand this. Order of order of calling and order of execution. Order of calling means which is the first constructor which is getting called. So obviously, if the object is being created for my derived class, then the constructor of the derived class is called first. That constructor will call the constructor of its parent class. Now, if class A also had some class Z as its parent, then obviously the class A's constructor would have first called class Z's constructor, right? So the calling sequence is from derived to base class, but the execution sequence is from base to derived class. So the order in which they got called, in their opposite order, they are being executed. So Z's data members will be initialized first, followed by A's data members, followed by B's data members. Clear on this? This is very important, order of calling and order of execution. Now, yesterday also I told that if at all there are some data members which are to be initialized, we are passing values for the initialization 2, 3, fine. Then it is the responsibility of the derived class constructor to pass the required values to the constructor of its base class. Now, for example, I am passing 4 or 3 values, right? 2, 3, and 4. Class B has a data member. Let us call it as B. Class A has a private data member A, and maybe class Z has a private data member small z. Fine. Now, since 3 values are being passed, we need to have a constructor of class B which will accept those 3 values. Right? Now, once that constructor is called, we will obviously, or the compiler will obviously implicitly call a constructor I mean the default constructor of its base class. Fine. Implicitly it will be called. But do we want the default constructor to be called in this case? No. Because we are passing some values for the above classes to get initialized. That is why we have to make an explicit call, and we have to pass whatever data members are required by all the previous classes. So I'll pass this 3 and 4 to the constructor of my class A. Now class A constructor will accept those two values. It will perform the initialization of A with the first one, this one, and then constructor of class Z will get called, and this int, the second value, will be passed to the parameterized constructor of class Z. Clear? Two things to note over here. Number one, if you don't mention this call or this call, whatever constructor you are calling, then implicitly the default constructor will be called of the parent class by the compiler. Fine. And if you want to make a call to the parameterized constructor, then you need to mention the call explicitly like this. Right? Another thing, number two, that for the default constructor to be called, there should be a default constructor in my base class. No matter the default constructor is explicitly defined by you or the default constructor is automatically created by the compiler. It should be existing in the base class. See here, I am creating object of class B. So while I am creating the object of class B, I have to take care that I will pass the values for all the previous classes also. I mean the values for data members of previous classes. So for example, I am passing these three values. So definitely a parameterized constructor of class B will get called for the object small b, which is going to accept three integer values. So let us say it is I, j, and k, right? So B class is having a data member small b, which is getting initialized with this I or any of the three values. We don't have any fixed sequence. But again, we are passing the remaining two values to the constructor of class A. For example, I am passing j and k to the constructor of class A. Now, the constructor of class A will accept them. Uh, so I'll say I and j, local variables for this constructor. Right? Now, class A has a data member A with which it will initialize. It will assign I to A, and then the class Z's constructor will be called with the J. So Z's parameterized constructor has only one argument to accept, that is this one, and small z is initialized with this I. Are you getting the point why the number of parameters for every constructor is reducing?
Yes, sir.
Any other doubt in this? Remember that whatever constructor you are calling or whatever constructor you are expecting to get called, that type of constructor should be present in my base class. Either it should be present explicitly defined by you, or it should be present because of automatic creation by the compiler, and that is only possible in case of default constructors. But if you define a parameterized constructor in the class, you cannot expect a default constructor to be automatically created by the compiler. We have discussed this earlier, right? So you need to explicitly mention the default constructor if at all there is a possibility that default constructor of the base class would get called. Order of calling is from derived to base. Just now we saw, right? The first call was made to this. Then before the body of constructor B got executed, the call was made to the constructor A. Before the body of constructor A got executed, this call was made to the uh, constructor of class Z. Now, since we have reached at the very base class, then we can execute the base class constructor followed by its derived class constructor, then followed by the last derived class constructor. Understood? So the execution is being done firstly for the base class, then the intermediate derived class, and then the final derived class. This is the execution. Clear?
Yes, sir.
So what the point was, since we create objects of the derived class, it is the responsibility of the derived class constructor to call the base class constructor. Now the calling can be with parameters or without parameters, we saw. Okay. Whenever you create derived class object, then first the base class default constructor is executed. Definitely. If I am creating a derived class object, then base class constructor is to be executed. But which one? Default constructor will be executed, if at all you don't mention it explicitly. And then the derived class constructor finishes the execution. Fine. The same note is given whether derived class default constructor is called. Understand this, huh? Whether the derived classes default constructor is called or parameterized constructor is called, the base classes default constructor is always called inside them, inside the derived class constructor by the compiler. Base class default constructor is called, unless we explicitly call any other type of base class constructor. So we have discussed this point, very important point to note. Okay, fine. Yeah, so order of inheritance is explained and order of calling of constructors is given. So suppose if we are having such an inheritance scenario, class C, class B and class A. Class C is getting inherited in class B. Class B is getting inherited in class A. So in this case, the order of constructor call will be something like this. Actually, this is not the calling, this is execution. Order of calling will be A, B, then C. But this is the execution, right? Okay. We are now moving towards destructors. Okay. How is the order of destructors calling and execution? So the order of destructors call and execution is the same. So the destructor for the derived class is called first, followed by the destructor of uh, the intermediate derived class, and followed by the destructor of the very base class. right? So exact opposite to what we had in case of execution of constructors, right? Exact opposite. Okay. One thing to note down here is there is no need for me to explicitly call. Like, for example, in our case, what we did, the class B constructor accepted three values, and two of those values were passed to class A constructor. Now, is it possible in case of destructors, like class B destructor is calling class A destructor? Explicitly, do we need to mention such things? No, because we don't even call the destructor explicitly, right? So, and definitely the destructors don't have arguments, so naturally whatever version of the destructor will be called, that will be the default one, because there is only one version for the destructors, there are no arguments. So no need to make such explicit calls to the base class destructor like we did in the case of constructors. Fine. So this is very important to note. Destructors in the base and the derived class are called automatically.